Welcome to Kids Beyond the Pitch, the Kids for the World podcast exploring the impact of football kits on sustainability, social change, and the broader sports industry's environmental responsibility.
Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive?
Always ready.
Today, we're looking at something I find really fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's how sports and climate change are kind of, intersecting more and more these days.
Makes sense. I mean, so much of sports is outdoors.
Right, exactly. And there's this whole framework for it. It's called Sports for Climate Action.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, you provided us with 2 documents from the UN about it all. And wow, I had no idea how big of an impact sports have on the environment.
Yeah, it's pretty eye-opening.
But the potential for sports to drive positive change is huge.
For sure.
So the big question we're exploring today is, can the thrill of the game help us tackle this whole climate crisis thing?
Let's find out.
Okay, so before we get into the framework itself, can you kind of lay out the context for us? Why is this so urgent?
Well, we're already seeing the impacts of climate change on sports all over the world.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
I mean, think about coastal erosion affecting seaside golf courses or baseball fields.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Or ski resorts dealing with warmer winters and not enough snow.
Yikes. Yeah, that's a big one.
Right. And the Paris Agreement, you know the one.
Yeah.
Well, it set these goals to combat climate change. And the sports world, with all its fans and global reach, has a big role to play if we're going to hit those goals.
Okay, so we've got climate change impacting sports now, and the sports world has the potential to step up and lead.
Exactly.
So tell me about this framework, Sports for Climate Action. What's it all about?
It's basically a roadmap for sports organizations to take meaningful action on climate change. And it's backed by the UN.
Okay, that's pretty big.
It is. And it's not just for the huge professional leagues, you know?
That's good.
Yeah, it's designed for everyone, leagues, clubs, teams, media, universities, you name it.
I like that. It's inclusive.
Yeah.
You know, as someone who's always trying to learn new things and then actually do something with that knowledge, I really appreciate that this framework seems to offer some pretty concrete steps and resources, not just vague ideas.
You're right. It's very action-oriented.
So what are they trying to achieve? What are the big goals here?
So there are 2 main objectives. The first one is to set a clear path for the entire global sports community to combat climate change.
Okay, that's ambitious.
It is. It means setting targets, taking action, and really holding each other accountable.
Got it. And what's the second objective?
Well, sports have this incredible power to influence people.
Yeah, for sure.
So the second objective is all about using that influence to raise awareness about climate change and drive action among all the fans out there.
Oh, smart.
Right. Think about the Olympics or the World Cup.
Billions of people watching.
Exactly. That's a huge platform to promote climate action.
I'm starting to see how powerful this could be.
Yeah.
Okay, so how does it actually work? What are the nuts and bolts of this framework?
Well, at its core, there are 5 key principles that guide the whole approach. They work together to create a whole strategy for climate action in sports.
5 principles.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first one is all about promoting environmental responsibility. It's like a call to action for all these sports organizations.
To do what?
To go beyond just doing one-off sustainability events.
Oh, okay, so it's got to be more than just a one-time thing.
Yeah, and really weave sustainability into every single aspect of how they operate.
So it's about a fundamental shift in how these organizations think, not just doing a few symbolic gestures.
Exactly.
What's the next principle?
Principle number 2 focuses on reducing their climate impact.
Makes sense. How do they actually do that?
Well, it emphasizes this hierarchy of actions. Avoid, reduce, substitute, then compensate.
Okay, break that down for me. What does avoid or substitute look like in the sports world?
Well, let's take travel, for example. A lot of teams travel by plane.
Right, especially pro teams.
Avoiding could mean finding ways to have more regional competitions to cut down on travel, or using technology more for virtual meetings and stuff.
Yeah.
And substituting could be opting for more sustainable ways to travel, like choosing trains over planes whenever possible.
Or electric buses instead of those big diesel ones.
Exactly.
I see how that ties into principle number 4, which is all about sustainable consumption.
Right.
That's where we as fans come in, right?
100%. Principle 4 is about the choices fans make, how we get to the game, what kind of merch we buy, all of that.
So our choices really matter.
They do. The framework talks about things like using sustainable materials for merch and promoting public transportation to the games.
I like that.
Yeah.
What about principle number 3?
That one's all about climate education. It's about giving sports organizations the knowledge and resources they need to make smart decisions about climate action.
Okay, so before you can fix something, you have to understand it.
Right. They need to understand the climate challenges that are unique to where they are and the sport they play.
Gotcha. And the fifth and final principle.
This one focuses on advocacy and communication. It's where the power of sports to reach so many people really comes in. The framework encourages teams and leagues to use their platforms
To do what?
to advocate for climate
I
action.
love that.
Right. Athletes, broadcasting, those huge sporting events, they can all be used to inspire people to make a change.
It's like turning those global events into climate education and advocacy opportunities.
Exactly.
Okay, we've got these 5 awesome principles. What's next? How do sports organizations actually put them into action?
The framework lays out 4 steps: commit, plan, proceed, report.
All right, take me through them.
The first step is obviously committing to the framework, signing on, and pledging to take action.
But it's more than just signing a piece of paper, right?
Right. Step 2 is coming up with a specific plan. How are they going to reach their climate goals?
So they got to take those principles and figure out, okay, how are we actually going to do this?
Yeah. It's like a roadmap for change.
Okay, then what?
Step 3 is where they put that plan into action, actually making tangible changes, using those avoid, reduce, substitute strategies we talked about.
Got it. And I'm guessing step 4 is all about sharing what they've done.
You got it. They have to publicly report on their progress each year.
Smart. It keeps them accountable and transparent.
Right. Plus, it lets everyone track the impact of their efforts, and they can learn from each other.
I see how this creates like a system of continuous improvement. It's not just setting a goal and forgetting about it.
Exactly.
This Race to Zero campaign you mentioned in the documents. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Sure. Race to Zero is this global thing. It brings together companies, cities, all kinds of organizations, and they all pledge to hit net zero emissions by 2050 at the latest.
Wow, that's a big goal.
It is, and by using the Sports for Climate Action framework, sports organizations can actually join this global effort.
So it's like everyone working together towards the same big goal. This is all really impressive. But are we actually seeing this framework in action out there in the real world?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We're seeing it everywhere, from local sports clubs to those huge international events.
Really?
Yeah. There's a big push for renewable energy and sustainable ways to travel. Even new stadiums are being designed with sustainability in mind.
Wow, so it's more than just talk. People are actually doing it. Can you give me some examples? What are you seeing out there?
Well, some major leaguers are moving to use only renewable energy for their stadiums and stuff.
That's awesome.
Right. And some teams are even starting to use biofuels for their buses or choosing to take the train instead of flying whenever they can.
And it's not just those big pro teams, right?
Nope, not at all. Local clubs are doing things like carpooling, choosing sustainable equipment, even getting their whole communities involved in doing stuff for the environment.
It's so cool to see it happening on so many different levels.
I know. It really shows you just how much potential sports have to be a force for good in the world.
For sure. Any like early success stories that really stand out to you?
Oh, yeah, there are some pretty amazing ones. One of the major leagues has promised to power all their stadiums with renewable energy by 2030. And they're already making some serious progress.
Wow. That's a big commitment.
It is. And on the smaller scale, I know of this youth sports league that partnered with a recycling company.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Now they have this awesome waste management program at all their events. They've reduced their footprint by so much they even compost all their food waste.
That's so awesome. It just shows that even small groups can make a real difference.
Totally. And those smaller groups, they're often closer to their communities.
Right. So they can have an even bigger impact.
Exactly.
This is all so encouraging.
Yeah.
But are there any like challenges or roadblocks that you're worried about?
Well, keeping this momentum going is super important. We've come a long way, but we can't slow down.
So how do we make sure it doesn't just fizzle out?
Accountability is key. We need to make sure sports organizations actually follow through on all those great promises. And that's where those reporting mechanisms we talked about really come in.
So it's all about being transparent, walking the walk.
Exactly.
I imagine some people might be skeptical about all this. Like they might say, sports is just entertainment. Why should it be involved in climate action?
That's a fair point, but climate change affects all of us, right? Every part of society needs to be a part of the solution. And sports has this unique ability to reach so many people, to inspire change on a huge scale. It's about more than just the environment. It's about using the power of sports to get people working together towards a shared goal.
I see your point. It's about more than just the sport itself. It's about using it as a tool for good.
Exactly.
So what about those fans out there who are hearing all this and feeling inspired? What can they do to get involved and help this movement?
Go to the UN climate change website. They have a ton of info about the framework and all the organizations involved.
Okay, so that's a good place to start.
Yeah. Find some groups that you connect with, maybe even some local ones.
And support those teams and athletes who are
Yeah.
really taking this climate action thing seriously.
Yes.
Our choices and our voices as fans can make a difference.
They really can. And remember those principles we talked about?
Yeah.
They apply to all of us.
You mean like making more sustainable choices in our daily life?
Exactly. How we travel, what we buy, all of it matters.
Even the little things add up.
They really do.
This is really inspiring stuff. Okay, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to come back to the idea of climate education.
Sure.
How is this framework helping to educate people, both inside and outside the sports world, about climate change?
Well, knowledge is power, right? The more we all understand about climate change, the better equipped we'll be to take action. It's about explaining the why behind making these changes.
So how does the framework actually promote this climate education?
Well, it provides a lot of resources and training to sports organizations.
Like what?
Oh, all sorts of stuff, like how to calculate a carbon footprint and things like that. Plus, we're seeing more and more sports organizations using their platforms to spread the word.
That's awesome. Like, how are they doing that?
Well, some teams are talking about climate change on their social media. The channels that show the games are highlighting sustainability efforts.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, some stadiums are even using those big screens to teach fans about climate change.
That's amazing. They're turning these giant sporting events into opportunities to learn about the climate.
Right, and some groups are even partnering up with environmental organizations to offer workshops and events.
That's great. They're really making it fun and accessible for everyone.
Exactly.
And it just makes sense. Sports have this crazy ability to connect with people on a really emotional level.
Yeah, they do.
If we can tap into that, use that power to promote climate action, I think it could have a huge impact.
No question. And as more athletes and teams start talking about climate change, it helps to make it feel more normal.
Right. Less like a fringe issue.
Exactly. And then more people feel comfortable getting involved.
It's like this ripple effect.
Totally.
This is all so encouraging.
Yeah.
Okay, one last question before we move on. We've talked a lot about the role of sports organizations and fans. What about the role of governments?
Ah, that's a great question.
What can they do to help move this all forward?
Well, while it's super important that individuals do their part, we also need big systemic change. And that's where governments have a big role to play.
Yeah.
They can create policies and offer incentives to help sports organizations make those more sustainable choices.
Like what kinds of policies?
Transportation is a big one,
Because of all that travel, right.
Right. They could invest in public transportation, give people reasons to buy electric vehicles, even encourage more regional tournaments and competitions to cut down on those long trips.
So it's about making it easier and cheaper to choose more sustainable transportation options.
Exactly.
What else can governments do?
They could also focus on sustainable practices in stadium design. Like they could set rules for how energy efficient new stadiums have to be, maybe give tax breaks to organizations that build with green practices.
So it's about using their power to kind of nudge the whole industry in the right direction.
Exactly. And don't forget about climate education.
Oh, right.
They can fund educational programs, give resources to schools and community groups. They could even work with sports organizations to get climate change messages out to the public.
So it's about using their resources and their reach to get more people involved. Are there any governments already doing this kind of stuff?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Some countries are offering money to sports organizations that do sustainable things. Others are making plans to make their whole sports sector more green.
Wow, that's great to hear.
Yeah. And some cities are even making sustainability a key part of their bids to host big sporting events.
Wow, so it's becoming more and more mainstream.
It is.
This is really exciting stuff.
It is.
Before we finish up this part of our deep dive, though, you mentioned something earlier that really stuck with me.
What's that?
This idea of using those huge global sporting events like the Olympics and the World Cup to really showcase climate action. I want to hear more about that.
I think it has so much potential. I mean, imagine billions of people around the world watching these big events and seeing how sustainability can be a part of them.
Yeah, it's almost hard to imagine how big of an impact that could have. What would that actually look like?
Picture those events really embracing those 5 principles. Everything from the stadiums to the transportation to how they interact with fans.
So it's about making sustainability a core part of the entire event.
Exactly. It would send a powerful message that the sports world is serious about this climate change thing. And it might even inspire other industries to step it up too.
Right, because if sports can do it, anyone can.
Exactly.
And don't forget about the athletes.
Oh, yeah.
They're already role models for so many people.
Yeah.
Just imagine how influential they could be as advocates for climate action.
Right. Imagine them using their platform at the Olympics to talk about climate change, to advocate for those sustainable practices, and to get fans all over the world excited to get involved.
That would be incredible.
Yeah.
It feels like things are really starting to change. There's so much momentum building around this. But where do we go from here? What are the next steps for sports, for climate action?
Well, I think the biggest thing is just keeping this momentum going.
Yeah.
We've come a long way in a short time, but we got to keep pushing forward.
So how do we make sure all these organizations aren't just like, talking a big game, but actually making real changes?
Well, one thing is setting really clear targets, like measurable ones.
Oh,
It's not enough to just say, hey, we care about sustainability. They have to define what that actually means for them.
So like specific actions and ways to track their progress.
Exactly. And that's where that whole reporting thing comes in.
Oh, right.
They have to be transparent about what they're doing, share the good and the bad.
Yeah, I get that.
It builds trust with the fans and the sponsors. It shows they're serious about this.
And it also lets everyone see what's working, what's not working.
Exactly. We can all learn from each other.
And keep pushing each other to do better.
Right. This climate thing is a big challenge. We need everyone working together.
So it's not about competition here. It's about collaboration.
Totally. We got to share what we know, share resources, work together.
And when you have all these different people coming together with different ideas, that's where you get real innovation.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so we've got to keep the momentum going, set clear goals, be transparent, and work together. But what about all those people out there who are listening and thinking, I want to help. What can I do?
Well, there's a ton of info on that UN climate change website.
Oh, right, the one you gave us the documents from.
Yeah, that one. They have a whole list of organizations that are part of the framework.
Cool,
Yeah.
so people can see who's already taking action.
Right. And maybe even find some local groups to support.
Yeah, do some research. Find a group that you connect with. Get involved.
Even small actions can make a big difference.
I love that.
Yeah.
This has been a really eye-opening deep dive.
It has been.
Thank you so much for sharing all this with us. It's inspiring to see all this progress happening.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's great to see the sports world stepping up to this challenge.
It's a good reminder that we can all be part of the solution. Athletes, fans, anyone can contribute to making things more sustainable.
Right. We're all in this together.
Before we wrap things up for today, I want to go back to those 5 principles that we talked about.
Sure.
Promoting environmental responsibility, reducing climate impact, climate education, sustainable consumption, and advocating for climate action. They're like a roadmap, not just for sports, but for everyone.
Oh, for sure. Those principles can apply to all sorts of things, not just sports, businesses, governments, even just individuals.
It's about thinking about our own impact on the environment.
Right, making better choices in our daily lives.
And speaking up, advocating for change.
Exactly. We can all be a part of creating a better future.
I'm curious, as this Sports for Climate Action framework keeps growing and changing, how do you see those principles evolving?
That's a great question, I think. I think we'll see those principles get even more specific, like more about taking action,
Oh, okay.
As we learn more and get more data, the whole framework will probably get more detailed about setting targets and measuring progress.
So less about broad ideas and more about a concrete system for making things happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we'll see a lot more emphasis on innovation and working together.
Oh, yeah. Makes sense.
As this climate crisis gets more and more urgent, the sports world is going to have to come up with some really creative solutions and find ways to make them happen fast.
I get that. And the principles themselves, like promoting environmental responsibility, reducing their impact, that whole education piece, those all feel pretty solid.
They do. They really do. They get at what it means to be responsible,
Yeah. Like we all have a role to play in tackling this climate challenge.
Absolutely.
This has been a really fascinating look at this whole framework and all that it can do.
It has been.
But before we wrap up completely, I want to leave everyone with something to think about.
Okay.
We've talked about how influential sports are, how those big global events can reach so many people, and how athletes can use their platform to speak up for climate action.
Yeah.
So how can we use events like the Olympics and the World Cup to go even further?
What do you mean?
Like, not just showcasing what's being done, but really pushing for even bigger commitments from those world leaders.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Sports have this unique power to bring people together, you know?
Yeah, it's true.
It could be this global movement that gets everyone on board with climate action
Oh, I like that.
and puts the pressure on those leaders to really step up and do something.
It's like sports could be the spark that ignites a global climate awakening.
Yes.
Exactly.
And I think this Sports for Climate Action framework is a perfect roadmap for doing just that. It shows how we can all set a good example, get the word out, inspire people to take action, and hold each other accountable.
Right, because when it comes to this climate thing, we're all on the same team.
And that's a message that everyone needs to hear, not just in the sports world.
Definitely.
This has been a really amazing conversation.
It has.
I'm so energized by seeing how much people care about this and how much is already being done.
Me too. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. It's been really insightful.
Thanks for having me.
And for everyone listening, we'll put links to all those resources in the show notes. So check those out and join us on this journey toward a better future for sports and for the whole planet.
Yeah, let's do it.
Until next time, keep diving deep and keep taking action.